You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGachy, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Hey, good people. What is going on? I'm probably sounding a little bit weird because I'm trying to talk a little bit quiet because I'm coming at you from the lobby of the Marqueen Hotel in Seattle, Washington. I forgot to record my outro/intro before I left the shred shed, and I'm here up in Seattle doing some recording with my dude Daniel Harmon. Shout out Daniel. I'm actually playing some guitars on his record. I made a bunch of noise on it this weekend, and I can't wait for you guys to hear that. That's gonna be super, super cool. Anyways, I'm here in the supposedly haunted Marqueen Hotel recording this intro for you for this episode. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. We go over a lot of the trials and tribulations of small business and the gear world, which I know you know is one of my favorite things to talk about on this podcast, and a lot of other things. And it's fun. It's always fun to talk to people who are in this thing day to day on that grind. Anyhow, I guess I probably don't need to waste any of your time with this weird whispery voice that I'm giving you right now. Like I said, this place is supposedly haunted. I don't know if that's true or not, because I've slept like a baby. But if you Google it, Marqueen Hotel, Seattle, haunted, some stuff comes up, I'm just saying. Anyhow, just a quick reminder before we jump into this episode, there is an ad-free option of this episode. If you do not like the new ad format, you can go to patreon.com/tonemob, where for $3 a month, you can get the ad-free bonus episode. Oh boy, air brakes going off in the background. That's professional. Anyhow, you can get the ad-free bonus episode, and if you want more, you can get extra episodes, and that is just $5 a month. And those will almost never have anyone in the background making any kind of sounds at all. I kid, of course. These people are doing their jobs. They're working hard. I'm just here in their lobby annoying everyone. Anyhow, let's get into this episode. Let's go. Let's talk to Taylor.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have Taylor Cox from Amplified Nation. What's going on, dude?
Hey, Blake. I'm so happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm glad we finally made this happen. Thank you for reaching out. This is exciting.
Yeah, I know we've been talking for a couple months. I've been following you on Instagram, watching your show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I feel like before you reached out, I know, it's hard for me to trace back like the way the internet is these days. It's like I knew that I answered it the DM because I knew I had heard of you before. You know, it wasn't completely out of the blue, but I couldn't remember where. I was like, is this a Gear Page thing? I can't remember where I knew of the brand from, but I definitely did. But I didn't quite realize, how extensive your background was with this very specific thing. So I want to get into that. But before we get into, the dissecting of the Dumbles and all that, like, when did you start playing? Like, what's your superhero origin story?
Well, man, I played guitar my whole life. Like, started guitar when I was in 7th grade, I think, back when grunge was really popular in the 90s. And you just fell in love, I had a couple electrics. I remember I had a Gibson Les Paul Standard that I loved. It was like black with the pink chainsaw case with like the plush inner side. But yeah, man, I just loved guitar and played my whole life. And then when we were, I was living closer to Boston with my wife and just looking to make some extra money on the side. So I started doing some stuff on Craigslist and I was doing restoration and Tolex repair. So if somebody had like an old Marshall or a Fender and they wanted to make it look new again, they'd find me on Craigslist. They could stop by the house, drop their amp off. I'd strip it, change the color, or just like restore something back to its original state. But it was funny, man, because like we had this tiny little apartment, and I'd have bands like bring like bass cabs and like guitar half stacks and stuff, and like wheel them into our 1-bedroom apartment. I'd lay the Tolex out on the floor. But it was great, man. We kind of got started and just like built a passion for gear. It was just like really fun back then to just kind of be involved with it and like buy stuff and like get all this like gear and just like be immersed in the whole like community. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember the Craigslist days. It's kind of funny that you bring that up. I remember meeting a guy off Craigslist that had built like a bunch of Fender clones and going into his basement and noodling around on, like, he's like, this is my take on a Princeton. It was kind of funny because I remember being like, this doesn't sound like a Princeton, but sure. And I just forgot that Craigslist used to be such an integral part of the gear world. It kind of has fallen by the wayside, at least around here. I mean, there's still a lot of buying and selling that happens, but I don't see people getting companies off the ground on Craigslist like they used to. It's kind of an interesting trend.
Yeah, I mean, there's just like so many other places to go now. But dude, there used to be like everything on Craigslist, and you could go on there and like kind of trust people, and then it just got to a point where like it just feels icky at this point to be like, especially like buying gear or having those people like come over your house, just random people that you meet. And I do that now, but I got like a nice spot and stuff. We got a commercial location, so it's not quite as shady. You know what I mean?
Right. That's funny. I was reminded of my friend Leon. He has a pedal company called Pelican Noiseworks. He bought a Silvertone Twin 12 off Craigslist years ago, and I remember like the guy kind of was trying to pull a fast one a little bit. Like he was like, "Oh, here's the amp," and he's like, "It works," and he's like, "Do you have any video clips or anything to prove that?" Because they met in like a parking lot of a Kroger or something, and the guy's like, "No, I didn't do that, but it works. Trust me, it does." And he's like, "Well, let's just verify that real quick." And he pulled a generator out of the back of his van and plugged it in, and it didn't work properly. And so, you got a few bucks off. But man, the crazy Craigslist days, such a wild time. Really.
Yeah, so I had I was customtolex@gmail.com, and and I just had it was like custom Tolex and restoration. And shortly after that, we wanted to give like the business a name. Yeah. So my wife had some skills in front page. Do you remember that?
Oh,
it was like it was way before like Squarespace and everything. You could build a web page and it would help you, I think, with some of the coding. I actually never did it any of myself, but she was like, "Let's create a web page." So we were just like, "All right, sweet. Let's call it Amplified Nation." And we named the business like way back then, and it just stuck like the whole time. So that was back in 2009 or 2010. And shortly after that, I started, we moved outside of the city, and I bought all these tools to redo the hardwood floor in my house. And I was like, man, I should start building my own cabinets. So I started doing like 1 or 2 little cabinets, and they were selling like really fast. And I'm like, this is amazing, So I got hooked into that, and ended up just like building a cabinet business over 3 or 4 years, and started doing more advanced stuff like the suede cabinets for Dumble guys, like guys that were building their own amps.
Yeah.
They had no place to get cabinets. So I was like, all right, let's put a design together. So I like basically just learned all this stuff. I got some books from the library on like woodworking and, how to set up your table saw and all this stuff. Bought a really big table saw and started making Dumble style cabinets. And just did that for a while. And it got me like so much cool experience, because at the end of it, like when I got really good at building cabs, like you could just tell me what you wanted or tell me what the chassis dimensions were, and I would design something in my head. But when I first started, I didn't have those skills. So I'd be like, man, if you want me to build like a cabinet for your amp, you got to send it to me, because I got to measure it. You know what I mean? And like I didn't have all the skills to drill. So I got all this really great experience, like seeing like some of the best amps that were out there, like Turoks, Blutotones, bunch of other ones, some Fuchs. I started working with Fuchs a little bit, and I just like was able to hear these beautiful Dumble style amps, man. And like, again, like just got hooked even more into like the guitar world, like it almost made like guitar like even more of a passion, because it wasn't just about the guitar anymore. I had like the amps, and then I was putting it together and I was building stuff, and then like people wanted it. You know what I mean? Like you're building something and then like someone's like, dude, I want that. It makes it even better. You're like, man, this is just an amazing thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. So I did the cabinet stuff for a while, and then I had so much great experience like seeing and playing those amps. I started building my own amps and did stuff like in the Dumble style, John Mayer kind of stuff. And that took off. And by like 2015 or 2016, I had 4 or 5 different models, and we redesigned the website and stuff, and just kind of taken off from there. And now I got a pretty cool spot just outside of Boston. Got 2 guys working here. We're probably doing like 8 or 10 amps a week, and just cranking stuff out, man. I'm sitting in the demo room right now. I got a bunch of stuff in here. So yeah, it's great, man.
That's
super dream come
cool.
true.
So did the Dumble thing, did that come because you got really into those amplifiers yourself or the musicians that played them? Or was it just simply like, this is what people are asking for, I better dive into it?
There's a couple different things. So it was definitely, the way the amps sounded and how they felt. And a lot of my guitar heroes did play those amps. I didn't really know it, you know what I mean? Back when I was listening to those guys.
Sure.
But we found that out. But I really loved all the drama that was like in the Dumble style world,
Oh yeah.
Because there was like the secretism of the designs, there was the gooping of the amps, and then there was even like the gooping of the amps of the cloners, and then the cloners were fighting, and they were like, who's building the best Dumble style amp, and who's got the real information. And I just like, the other thing is like, it always seemed like that's where the money was going. Cause I think it's like the money like followed the drama or something. But I just loved it. Like it was sexy, and I love the way the amp sounded and stuff. But yeah, man, there was like something a little more to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the first time I heard the word Dumble, the name Dumble, I was literally like sitting in a truck. I used to be a mechanic. And so I was sitting in a big old Volvo, and I was on break, and as gearheads do, scrolling the forums, watching YouTube videos, watching Andy demos, doing all this stuff. And I stumbled across the gear page. It might have been Telecaster forum, something, where it was a comment. It was just somebody making a snarky comment. They were like, "Oh yeah,
probably the gear page."
Yeah, probably. It was but it was like, "Oh, what does this guy think he's Dumble?" And I was like, "What's Dumble? I don't even remember what they were referring to. It was referring to some amp builder that apparently thought highly of themselves, or this person thought they thought highly of themselves. And so I immediately started Googling Dumble, like Dumble amp. Like, what is this? And I'm finding all these pictures of Santana and all these things. And I'm like, I had no idea this was such a big deal. And I saw the prices and how I like got kind of obsessed with the mystique, like you're talking about. Like, what is this? What in the world is this thing? And why are people so crazy about it? You're right. The drama is unlike, the only thing you could probably compare it to is maybe the Klon, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But even there, it's not quite to that level, and then the Klon, circuit is pretty well established at this point. People know what it is and how to make it. I think there's still a certain level of mystique around the Dumble stuff where not everyone fully knows the ins and outs of it. So when did you first, what was your first experience trying to dissect this?
There was a guy that I met that lived in a town called Winchester, which is just outside of Boston. It's a really nice suburb. And he had seen my Craigslist ad. Mm-hmm. So it was way back. And he was like, "Hey man, can you recover my amp in suede?" And I was like, what? This guy's insane. I was like, I don't think I could do that. And he was like, "Well, you should come by and check out some of the stuff that I have." And I was like, "All right, sweet." So I went to his house, and I think he had 3 real Dumbles in his basement.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was just wild. I didn't even know what they were. And one was yellow. It was number 84. It was a combo, had the Vox cloth and an old EVM 12 in it. Beautiful amp. He had a dual Showman that was converted into an Overdrive Special and had rectifier tubes in the back, which was wild.
Yeah.
And then I think he had the Super Reverb that was also modded. And he let me play the amps, and they just like sung like nothing I'd ever heard before, and it just got me kind of hooked on it. I thought they were so great. But one of the things that added to the drama and everything is like not all the amps were the same.
Right.
So
Right.
you could get information on a specific Dumble, but maybe that wasn't a great Dumble. You know what I mean? And so your information isn't as valuable as if you got information on a really great sounding Dumble or one that was played by a celebrity or something. So then there was even that too, where guys were fighting about like, well, did you clone a good one?
Right.
You know what I mean? Or so there was even more drama.
And then good or bad, obviously, is kind of subjective or very subjective. And he would also make amps for specific people. So I know for a fact that some of my friends play things that I can't make sound good. Like I'm like, ugh, this is just mushy and gross and I can't do anything with it. And they plug in to the same exact rig and it sounds glorious, so it really does come down to the player at the end of the day, but also he would make things for if he decided to make you an amp and you were going to do it, he listened to your music. I mean, that's the legend, right? He would listen to your music, listen to you play and try to tune it specific to you. So one person to another, it might sound like trash or treasure depending on who's plugging into it.
Yeah. It's the crazy thing too, is like even an amp like the Overdrive Special that's so simple, only having a clean and an overdrive channel, like you can make the slightest tweak to a grid resistor or a resistor in the preamp that controls the tone stack and the amp completely changes. And you could have one of those amps that's got a certain preamp that sounds great with humbuckers, and then the next one's got a different amp, a different style preamp. Maybe the plate resistors are lower, and that amp shines really well with strats.
Yeah.
So it's like even just the slightest change, you can really make a difference in the voicing and then tailor to that specific customer,
So when you first started trying to make these, did you base it off a specific Dumble or did you base it off of just kind of the conglomeration of different ideas that you had saw floating around?
Yeah, so I got some information. There's a lot of information online that's available for guys that want to build their own amps. And there's a website called the Amp Garage, and you can go on there and there's schematics and layouts for different Dumbles. And the one that I had decided I wanted to build was Robin Ford's 102, which is a high plate Skyliner, late 80s voicing. And if you've heard Robin, like what the tone is, it's chirpy, kind of saxophone sounding. It's got a lot of like note flipping going on, cool compression on the front end of the note. And that's actually probably grown to be my favorite Dumble preamp. But that's where I started and built one of those, built 100 watt. And, it's funny because that amp ended up selling. Like before I had it online, I had kind of built up like a reputation of being a great cabinet builder. And it was actually, I think the guy that had the Dumbles in Winchester bought that amp from me. And I was like, wow, people want this stuff too. So like, I was like, hey man, I'll start building my own amps. So it was a bit of a learning curve, like for sure,
Absolutely.
Not so much like putting the amp together, but like, how do you put an amp together like that doesn't break, like you can send to someone and like you actually, create like a product with some longevity, something that like is durable and things like that. And then how do you do that, repeatedly?
Yeah. What were some of those early lessons? So you built one and then you realized you needed to increase the reliability. So what are some of the things you started integrating that helped that?
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4,800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations and 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services, and it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there.
Well, there was a lot of big things that I did. The first was like really, getting your soldering skills to the point where like you could work for NASA. You know, like you really got to like pay attention to stuff, extreme attention to detail, heating up your work and things like that. But some of the best things that I did to my product, first of all, was getting everything done and machined at a metal shop. So like I got a program called SolidWorks that allows you to 3D model metal parts. Mm-hmm. So you can go in and like design a full sheet metal thing in your computer. It's the coolest thing ever. And then you basically just like design this thing and you send the file to the metal shop and they can pull out like all the design files. They're called DXF files, and then just create your product. So that allowed me to like never have to drill any new holes by myself. You know what I mean? So like everything was in the exact spot. And after I learned that, I also found out that you could have those guys install hardware into the chassis.
Right.
So it's called PEM. And then that hardware never comes loose. So like in the early days, I'd have an amp that had like a whole bunch of screws and nuts and washers and stuff like that. And maybe something would come loose on the road. Yeah. And you can't have like a screw floating around in the middle of an amp. Like
that's not a good thing. No,
like something bad's going to happen. So once I switched over to PEM, we were able to create like something that was just like rock solid. And it's cool too, because if you look at like the bottom of our amps or even the back of our amps, you'll see that there's parts that like say the IEC jack, like where you plug your power cable in. Mm-hmm. There's parts that like there should be screws, but there's not screws because there's PEM inserts inside that are actually sitting under the paint that were cold forged into the chassis.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's a really clean look, and which I love. And the other thing is it's like super durable because like there's actually not a screw that can come loose. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It's all one
So that
unit.
was really great. Yep. And I think the other things is really just like almost creating, a system so you can double check your work. And now we like burn all the amps in for 30 or 40 hours. I have, dude, there's like, I have two guys working for me. Like at least two of us will play every single amp and go through all the features and make sure the reverb tank works and sounds correct. And like the bright switch works. And sometimes I'll even have everyone just like spend 15 or 20 minutes with an amp. So it's like, you can do all the checking that you want, but you also have to play it. Yeah. Like you have to sit with it for a while and just make sure that it sounds the right way and puts a little bit of life on it. But that's been a game changer too.
Yeah. Yeah. The burn-in is an interesting thing because you hear different people say different things about it. So do you literally just like flick it on the standby and let it run for however long, or what's the process like on that?
Yeah, bro. We just let it run. Mm-hmm. I'll do it. I have like these cradles. And so we'll put the chassis in the cradle so it's not actually in a head shell because the tubes like throw off a ton of heat. And I just plug it into a speaker cab and just let it hiss, and it'll sit there, turn it up a little bit, and just let it run for like a full day or two. We'll turn it off so it doesn't get like super hot for a couple hours, let it cool down. But we just let it run and we can hear if there's any crackling, which might indicate a poor solder joint or, maybe a bad tube if it's humming. But it really just puts some life in the components. So if you have maybe a capacitor that went bad or that's going to go bad, you sort it out now.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of guys do that. And I think one of the valuable things is really just listening to it and making sure that it's going to be quiet.
Right.
So I got 3 or 4 burning in right now in here. gets hot because it's like, these tubes and stuff. But then we even take them, we load them into the chassis, and I burn or into the head cabinet, and we burn them even more in the warehouse, and then we play them and stuff like that. So yeah, man, I think it's just really putting some life on them. Mm-hmm. Some of the guys that I know, they'll say to like, bring your amp home and let it run for 30 or 40 hours after, or actually I've heard guys that say 30 or 40 days.
Really?
I don't know. Like that seems like excessive. A long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, but, I think that even the guys I talked to that have had some of our products for like 5 or 6 years, like they tell me like the amp just keeps getting better,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
think it's just life.
It's one of those things where, when we talk about pedals, and I know there's some debate around this depending on who you talk to, that I'm thinking of somebody in particular that I won't name, but there's some debate around like components types, it's specifically in pedals, and how much of a difference that really makes, and where in the circuit it matters and where it doesn't, but in amps, it seems to be pretty universally accepted that the voltages and everything is so high that you can actually hear a difference in component type, not just how they measure, more so than in a pedal. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, there's kind of 3 main types of resistors that come to mind. There's a metal film, a carbon film, and a carbon comp. Mm-hmm. And all 3 of those have different sounds and different qualities. And it's funny because like the metal film is the quietest resistor.
Right.
But has like a kind of a tinny sound. Like it's not the best sounding resistor. And then a carbon comp is what they use in like the old Fenders and stuff. Mm-hmm. And those are probably the best sounding resistor, but they have more noise.
Right.
So carbon film, and I'm talking about stuff that's in the signal path. Carbon film seems to be like right in the middle of the road. Mm-hmm. So you've got a resistor that's quiet, but still sounds like organic and, really lets the guitar shine. So we use those in the signal path. And then we still use some metal film stuff for like plate resistors and power supply stuff, mm-hmm. because, you may not have actual guitar tone flowing through those resistors. And some of those resistors set the bias points and set the voltages for the different tubes. So you want them to be kind of precise, you know? So where a carbon film or carbon compositor may have a tolerance of 5% or 2%, you can get metal films that are 1%. Mm-hmm. So 100K is 100K.
Right.
So if you have a spot where like the voltage is splitting, like it's even, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But the pedal guys are crazy, man. They like all those like germanium transistors and stuff.
And I mean, I can tell you like in things like simple circuits like fuzz faces and whatever, you can tell at a component level, but some of the more complicated ones or things that are real heavy, it's like, that's going to be tough. I think a lot of the times, not all the time. There's exceptions to almost every rule, but that there's some people who really, it's starting to, I think, lessen a little bit, but there's some people who really harp on the SMT thing still when it comes to pedals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, that like this, I feel like this has been debunked, but some people are still all about like it has to be through hole because bigger components means bigger tone or something. I don't really understand that.
It does make sense. I don't do any of that SMT stuff. Mm-hmm. It looks cool, like, because it's like all automatic soldering and stuff. And like I think they use like wave soldering or even just like, I don't know, heat. But it's definitely a way to build a lot of stuff real fast.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And it can tend, like you said, tend to be quieter and things like that. And it comes down to like, I think that comes down to circuit design somewhat more than it does, which resistor you're using in a pedal. But amps are kind of a different ballgame as far as I'm aware. I don't know. I'm kind of a lay person. I know just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. Well, I think where the pedal is usually like, just a little teeny part of the chain.
Yeah.
Where the amp is such a large component of it, you're gonna be able to hear more, subtle differences to it.
Well, yeah. I mean, essentially, some people have asked me before, I have X amount of dollars. Do I go with like a really good guitar and an okay amp, or the other way around? And it sounds counterintuitive to some people, but I'm like, get a really good amp and your mediocre guitar will sound amazing. Like that's my general take on it. And I'm sure you share a similar thing as a guy who makes really nice amplifiers.
Yeah, man. I've got some really high-end guitars, and I don't really play them that much.
Yeah.
You know, I have some like middle ground guitars. You know, they're still custom shop stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually what we play. And I think that stuff sounds just as good as like the master built, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 Strats.
Yeah.
Or even like I love that new Murphy Lab stuff, like all those Les Pauls.
Oh, they're beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those are great, but they're so expensive. And, you know, I've got some older, like I have an R8 that's probably a lot older than, and not anywhere as nice as the Murphy Lab stuff. And I love it, man.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. One of my go-to guitars is still my 2003 Les Paul Special faded, you know? It's not.
Oh, you got a faded, huh?
Yeah.
Those are awesome.
This is my first guitar, my first electric guitar. I still love it. It's not the nicest guitar I have, but it's one of the ones I still play super often. It's still it definitely plays and sounds better than some very expensive guitars that I have played. So you never know what it's going to be. I love my 65 Melody Maker student guitar. I don't know. I love that thing. It rips. So it's not always about how much you spend on something. It's, does it work for you?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it too is like the pickups. You know, it's like you're almost hearing the pickups more than you're hearing the actual guitar. And the guitar is more tangible. You can feel it and stuff like that. But the amps, man, and I know it obviously like is in my favor to have this opinion, but I think as you go up and get nicer hand-built amps, like the differences are just amazing. You know, I mean, even when you go from, obviously everyone knows when you go from solid state to tube, like you've crossed an enormous barrier in terms of tone.
That was a game changer. I remember the first time that happened. It was a big deal for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's probably the biggest, you know, change. And then when you go from circuit board stuff to hand wired, then there's like another like epiphany when you're like, wow, like this amp is amazing. But then there's like another level, you know, and then I guess there's even more levels once you get up to real Dumble stuff. And there's vintage stuff too. But, you know, when you get up to kind of where we're at right now, like I got guys that come in here like, dude, when someone buys an amp from me, like I want to change guitar for them. You know, like I want to hear back from them and be like, Taylor, like everything changed. You know, my sound guy is saying I sound better. It feels better. My band's tighter, you know, everything. That's really the experience I want. But you have to get like into extremely nice amps. People have to make that jump too. Like no one's coming to me from, you know, playing a two-rock or a Bluetone and they're like, you've changed my life. You know, I'm sure they like their new amp, but the guys that are coming from a blues, you know, Fender Hot Rod Deluxe or, you know, somewhere in kind of the middle, like Guitar Center sort of realm, those guys get a boutique Dumble style amp and like it changes their world. You know what I mean? And that's the experience that I like to give people.
Yeah. I get that. I totally understand that. I'm really good friends with Chris Benson. And so, you know, the first time I was plugging into his stuff, which is not Dumble at all, but just kind of an example of a guy who makes really good, nice sounding amps. It changed a lot for me. And it changed a lot for how I thought about creating music, which sounds kind of weird, but it was like, oh, I can just like mostly in the mixing process. I'm like, oh, I can just get this sounding really good in the room, mic it up, and then I don't really have to do that much to it 99% of the time in post. It just get it right coming out of the speaker, get it properly mic'd, and you're good to go, you know, which is not only a time saver, but it also lets you get into that kind of inspired mode more quickly, you know, where you're
Isn't that an amazing feeling?
Yeah.
It's an amazing feeling.
Oh, it's the best. It's what we all chase all the time, right? I wish it could happen like that every time, but a nice amp will go a long way to getting you there quickly.
Yeah. Or like you get to just that one setting and you hit the note or whatever, and you're like, man, like this is doing what I actually want it to do.
Right.
You know, and, and I'm not having to try that hard. It's doing it anyway.
Yeah. That's a special feeling for sure. So have you had the opportunity to, I'm guessing this has happened for you, like make amps for people that you were looking up to musically, or you had people come to you that you're like, wow, I never thought I'd be talking to so-and-so, you know, now I'm building them an amplifier.
I definitely have. Yeah, I've gotten the chance to meet and work with like some of my heroes, like guys I have CDs at home of, you know, I just built a couple amps for Ben Harper.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Because he's a big Dumble guy. He's got one of Lindley's amps, and I think he has one of the last Overdrive Specials ever made. It's a green combo from the 90s.
Wow.
I know. And he was taking them on tour, and I think he just got sick of like the liability and having those things out because it's so risky. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. It's an easy thing to grab, you know? It's like,
yeah.
Now I have a 6-figure amp in my van, you know?
Yeah, man. So I built him 2 Bombshell Overdrive amps, and he's been touring with them all summer. That was really cool. I just met Robert Randolph this summer.
Mm-hmm.
We got him an amp. I met him at Fenway Park. It was really sweet. We went to like sound check with him and the family band, and my wife and I were like hanging out on stage. You know, he's playing a Bombshell Overdrive, and that was really cool. Yeah, man, I'm shipping Jeff Ament an amp today for Pearl Jam.
Wow.
Yep. He's been a customer for a couple of years. He's a really nice guy, and he does some guitar stuff on the side. So I know, he's normally a bass player.
Mm-hmm.
I got to meet Joe Bonamassa. I got him an amp, which is really cool. Overdrive Reverb. And man, there's been so many other people. It's hard to even remember all of them. But yeah, it's been such a huge perk from the job. And, it's fun. And it validates like so much of the hard work, like this business didn't take me like 2 or 3 years to create. Like it took like 10 years, of like working till 10 or 11 o'clock at night in my garage and like, burning my hands and like doing like days of woodworking and everything. And so, now like, I'll tell you what, like it's still hard. I still have to work really hard, keeping things going and, branding and all this stuff and growing. But, now like meeting these guys and having access to some of the people that I grew up listening to, and it's just amazing, and it says back to me like, hey man, like all that hard work was worth it.
Absolutely. That's the thing that I mention him on probably every episode because I talk to him every day. But, I talk to Scott from Stringjoy every day because we're partners and there's always a fire to put out. Right. And we mentioned that a few times where it's like, man, this is really a grind, not in a complainy way, but more in like for how much work it is to be in the MI industry. The revenue isn't necessarily there to back it up. Some people would consider us all crazy for the amount of hours we put in versus the actual dollars at the end of the day. But what I think those people don't understand is what you just talked about. It's not just about like how much money can I make? If it was that, we would be in something else. It's about getting to have those experiences and be a part of music in a real way. Sometimes I've had to step back and be like, whoa, I grew up listening to this person and now they're playing our strings. I'm hearing it live. They're playing our stuff. Our stuff is helping them make music. And that just is like, the brain just kind of explodes a little bit. And that's, I think, what drives most of us that are in the musical instrument industry, because it's not I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people are Scrooge McDucking through their vault of gold coins off the backs of this particular industry. Few people are, but 99% of people aren't.
Yeah, like one of the first guys I worked with was King Zapata. He plays with Gary Clark Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we went and met him and went backstage and stuff at Hampton Beach in New Hampshire, and it was just like so crazy to have somebody playing an amp of mine on stage.
Yeah.
And that was like 7 or 8 years ago. But shortly after that, I met Clay Cook, who is in Zach Brown band.
Mm-hmm.
And dude, he could not be a nicer guy. But he had us come up and go backstage to a Zach Brown show in New Hampshire. And it was so amazing. I brought him a steel string Singer 150 watt amp that I built. Whew. And he ended up playing it that night. Like when we went to the show and he played it, it was so cool. I remember being so nervous it was going to break, like I was like, this is either going to make or break me, It didn't break.
It didn't break. It didn't break.
No.
Yeah, that's funny because I was talking about how amazing it is to experience that, and I didn't even have that thought enter my brain until Scott actually said it one night. We were seeing JD Simo in Nashville, and he's like, "Man, I hope his strings don't break." I'm like,
nah.
I never even. Now you put that thought in my brain. Like I was never even worried about it, but now I'm sitting here like, don't break a string, because strings do break. We do our best to ensure that doesn't happen, but it still happens. And he didn't break a string, so it's fine. I asked Scott, though, after the show, I was like, any of our artists that you've went to their shows, have you ever seen them break a string? He's like, well, no. I'm like, then why do you get so nervous about it? And why do you make me so nervous about it? We were fine.
Because it's going to happen eventually.
It's going to happen eventually. I know. That's exactly what he said. But yeah, it's a funny business, because I think most of us got into, whatever sector of the MI industry because we grew up loving music. And for me, it took a little bit. I got a little bit distracted there for a few years. I got so wrapped up in the gear and showing the gear that I forgot to make music with it. I mean, I would still like do demos and technically play music, but it wasn't anything that spoke to my heart and soul the way that music did at one point. I think a lot of us can lose sight of that. Have you ever struggled with that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm here every day, and it's funny because I'm not playing out in a band, and I'm not sitting home and playing guitar, but I'm probably playing more guitar than I ever have.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just doing amps all day long, and I test all the products that go out, and I like to sit with them for a few minutes and just make sure they sound right. And it's fun, you know what I mean? It's a nice way to spend the day when you're picking up a nice guitar every few minutes and trying a new amp.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man, I've definitely sometimes felt like I have to play guitar that isn't connected to electricity.
Yeah.
I got to sit down. So I got some acoustics, and sometimes I just need to sit and just play acoustic, because the electric stuff ends up feeling so much like work, especially when you're sitting and testing something. I could sit in here and play an amp, and the whole time I'm gonna be like, well, does it sound right? Do I need to check the bright switch? Does the foot switch work correctly? You know what I mean? It's all in your head. And sometimes that connection is just almost something that needs to be reset. So yeah, man, I'll just sit with an acoustic every once in a while and just jam it for 30 or 45 minutes and really just kind of get back into that music thing. Because that connection is just so pure, at least for me.
Yeah.
Where it's not something that I built, not something I created, not something that if it breaks, it's going to be my fault, not something I have to fix. You know what I mean? It kind of backs you up a little bit. But yeah, man, it's, it is tough. I think a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of musicians, people do go in and out with the guitar. There's periods of time in your life, maybe you don't play for 3 months, and I think I've probably had a couple of those. It's been a long time. I've been doing this as my main thing for a while, but every time that happened, I always came back so much stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you have the drive back. It's I think it's probably hard to explain, but anybody that's listening to this show, I think, understands that. The first time you heard insert song here, it did something for you, in your heart, in your core as your person, whatever song that is for you. And I think what we are always trying to do is recapture that. We're always trying to reach out and find that feeling. And, I was literally just talking to my wife about this right before I came to do this, because she was talking some weird thing with her phone. She listens to more music than anybody I know. She's always got her phone streaming something, playing something. It's always music, always.
Yep.
And for me, most of the time when I have headphones on, honestly, it's podcasts. And she was asking me why is that? You're so in love with music that you made it a career somehow. How come you don't spend more time with it? And I told her, it was because when I'm listening, a lot of times I have to intentionally try not to analyze it, because I'm listening. Oh, what kind of reverb is that? Oh, what was that? It doesn't even matter what the song is. It could be hip hop. It could be metal. It could be anything. I'm always trying to figure out unintentionally what did they do there? What is that? I'm always analyzing it, and I'm not just absorbing it for what it is,
Yeah.
And so it becomes less of a passive thing that I can enjoy and more of an active thing unintentionally. And so podcasts for me, I can kind of just turn them on and pull weeds or whatever it is I'm doing that I'm trying to distract myself from. And she was like, that's so weird, because she's not a musician. And so she doesn't really have that. And it's kind of a weird discussion to have as musicians, where music becomes more analytical than it is soul searching sometimes.
That's exactly what I'm saying too. It's it comes to this thing where you're paying so close attention to the details that you're not enjoying the experience.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's why I really enjoyed going to the orchestra, because I don't know anything about an orchestra.
Yeah.
I was just I can just sit back and listen. you know? And when I go to a rock show, it's not quite the same thing anymore. I'm always trying to pick out what's happening. And I wish I could just turn that off. I'm glad that I have the ability to do that, but I do wish I could turn it off sometimes.
It's funny. We go to a lot of shows, and I like it when they're playing my amps, but and it's funny because I'm like, well, man, I wish I could just go to a show where like somebody wasn't playing my amp. But then I go to those shows and I'm like, man, I wish this guy was playing my amps. You know,
we can never be satisfied. The eternal struggle of the musician. We're always going to be upset about something or another.
Yeah, because like it's always like, man, I hope that amp doesn't break. You know, we just saw a band in Boston a few weeks ago, Dalton and the Sheriffs. One of my buddies is the guitar player. It was a really cool show. It was in Fenway. They got a new venue, and one of the guitar players was playing the Dirty Wonderland with a big 1x12. And luckily, he had been gigging it nonstop for like 2 months, so I was in the clear.
Yeah,
you know, so it was really great. That was a fun night. Got to hear that amp he played. But it is a good experience, you know, especially when I see these guys that are performing and they're using the gear that like I created.
Yeah.
And they love it. You know, they really love it, and they're as happy as they could be. You know what I mean, with the product, and that's really why you do it for.
Mm-hmm. So we've been talking a lot about the amps. Obviously, that's the bread and butter. But you also make some pedals. You want to talk about that a little bit? We kind of glossed over that.
Yeah, sure, man. So I make the Big Bloom Overdrive pedal, and it has never been like any of like really a main product for me. You had mentioned before the gear page, right?
Yeah.
So I used to go on the gear page a lot. I wouldn't say that I've built my business there, but I definitely got some help. And it's funny because like some of the threads on there, you know, sometimes weren't all that positive from some of the guys. And those, like, I always try to do the right thing, you know, when I was building this business for people, and I really try to create a good product. So every time there'd be a negative thread on there, it would actually boost my business, you know,
really?
Which is kind of funny. Yeah. Cause like, it would never be, you know, it's always just like the haters, you know what I mean? And the TGP guys, like they're kind of a mix. Like some of the guys love something, some of the guys just don't like anything, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, where I was going with this was probably back in 2014, there was a pedal called the Dumbloid.
That sounds familiar. I think I remember that.
It was made in Japan by this guy named Shin, and they were selling for $600, and like everyone was on there kind of like, you know, just ripping it apart. Like, oh, how could you possibly make a pedal for $600? It had the labels on the front. It wasn't like silkscreen, like somebody made labels with one of those Elmo punches.
Right.
Yeah. And so of course, like that was just getting the guys in deeper water with the gear page guys. So I had two people approach me, and they were like, hey, Taylor, like if we buy one of these pedals and send it to you, will you reverse engineer it and build us a clone? And I was like kind of new to like the whole, like I don't clone stuff now, but back then I was like, sure, man, you know what I mean? Sounds like a cool project.
Mm-hmm.
And so they sent me one of those pedals, and I ended up making a few clones of it, and I called it the Big Bloom. And word got out that I was cloning it, and then everybody wanted one.
Right.
So I was hand building them.
$600, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I sold it for like $300, which, you know, is still expensive for a pedal, but you know, I was hand building them and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was kind of my only venture into the pedal world, but it was cool, man. Like I made about 500 of them, and I used to cover them in suede. So I would like drill them and then like wrap them, or I'd wrap them in Tolex. I did some painted ones too, but it's a cool pedal. It's really throaty. It's high gain. It's got a lot of volume to it. And it does like the Dumble thing, like the controlled feedback and the note flipping, and the, you know, chirpy kind of saxophone. But it's a cool pedal, man. Yeah. You ever tried it? I should send you one.
I'd love to try one. I'm obsessive. I'm obsessed.
Yeah,
with
dude,
pedals.
I'll send you. We got some here. We just built a few of them this week. I'll send you one.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I can't wait to check it out. I thought that I would like eventually get out of this pedal thing. Not like get out of it like I'm never gonna like them again. I just thought that the sheen would start to wear off at some point, and I wouldn't be like this obsessed pedal person. And it hasn't.
We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby, because let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Good Hertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblissaudio.com. I think you're gonna like what you find.
I don't know what is wrong with me. There's something.
What are your favorite pedals? Are you like into, is it like delays, or do you like everything, like time-based stuff?
I like everything. I really do. It sounds like a cop-out, but if I had to pick my favorite, like straight up, if I could only play with two types of pedals ever again, it would probably be reverbs and fuzz. You know?
Yeah.
Just because they change it so drastically, but in a way that I'm very familiar with how to control. So even if I'm running them backwards and running reverbs into fuzzes and like doing all kinds of, I've done that so much. I'm very familiar with how to control it and what it's going to do. Like I'm very comfortable with the wild nature of those things.
Yep.
But I really love everything. Like this new Meris LVX, they call it a modular delay system, and that's true. It is that, but it is so many other things. There's bit crushers in there. There's so many things to play with that thing. It is like a supercomputer. It's not really a multi-effect as much as it is something that you can like build your own chain of stuff out of. It's really, really wild. It's very hard to explain.
That's cool. Do you remember those old units that like Boss made, and they'd be, a multi-effect?
Oh yeah,
they have like a bunch of different banks and stuff. Those were so cool, but I felt like I could never get back to like where I was on them. They'd be like, oh, you can store all your presets and make up your own user and stuff like that. I would sit with one of those and I'd have a great time, and then I'd sit down with it and it would just sound completely different. But those were always fun, man. Like they had like the octaves and just a bunch of different things you could do with them.
Yeah, those were interesting. I just got rid of one recently for that reason. I was like, I'm not gigging. I'm not somebody that's ever even really been that interested in playing live. I mean, I have here and there, but I'm just like such a studio nerd. I just want to be in the studio recording things and making these wildly like completely impractical chains, And
Yep.
so those all-in-one things, even like the modern versions like the Helix, while I appreciate their utility and they do sound way better than they ever have, it's still not. It doesn't excite me. If I was gigging, if I was flying around, yeah, I'd probably consider something like that just from a practical standpoint, but it doesn't excite me, and it's never has.
Do you ever mess with stereo stuff?
Oh, it's my bread and butter. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's where it's at, man.
Mm-hmm. Stereo delays, stereo reverbs.
Like flangers and choruses.
Mm-hmm.
We had two identical amps in here last week that this guy ordered just for this purpose, so he could run them in stereo.
Yeah.
And had one of my guys bring his board in, and it was like one of the coolest things I've ever heard. Like I've done a little bit of stereo stuff, but like this was different, because we had two identical setups, so we just set all the controls exactly the same,
mm-hmm.
and like and he had this big board, man, and all the flangers and like the trem, some of the stereo trems, like the dude just bouncing around back and forth. Oh, so cool.
Yeah, I like the trim. There's a few that do it. The one I use the most is the Mr. Black Penna trim. And it's like, it gives you that panning effect. It sounds like it's moving, like not ping-ponging back and forth, but like actually sweeping back and forth. And it'll mess your brain up in a good way. Like, it's pretty fun.
Yeah. I know. I definitely try to take advantage when we have so many amps around.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do is to play a loop into like one amp, and then I can go jam over it on another amp.
Yes.
Yes. That's a good time.
So what kind of like pedal board are you running? Are you into lots of effects, or are you more straight in guy most of the time?
I'm more of a straight in guy. Like I really like effects pedals, and I have a great time when we use them. But a lot of times, like I'm more of a delay. I like I really like reverb, but I try to get reverb from the amp whenever possible. It's a couple models we have that don't have reverb, and then I'll put a reverb pedal in the loop. But I really like delay. You know, I've had zillions of delay pedals. I'm stuck on the Boss DD5 right now, which I love. You know,
absolutely
digital delay. So that's really great. Yeah, but I've always been kind of straight in. I think one of the things like being an amp builder is I've just always wanted to connect like with the amp. Yeah. You know, so I think it's important for me to have that mentality. But I'd love to get a big board. Like I see these guys have the boards and they're all organized and the power supplies, and then I find out there's pedals on the bottom of them and stuff. You know what I mean? Like I'd love to have something like that with the switcher. And I've had some guys offer to build me one in the past for trade and stuff. And I've just never really adopted it. But I don't play out either. So like, I feel like if I was playing out, I would definitely have a nice board. But you must have one, right?
Well, that's the funny joke. You know, that's the funny thing about me. So because I don't play out, I have a couple of very nice boards here that I should by all rights like have set up nicely. There's nothing on them because I just have a table that I set up. Like I never plug into the same rig twice hardly. So I'll just grab pedals out, set up some ridiculous effects chain, plug into 2 amps and just go and just be off to the races. And then the next day I'll come and I'll take it all apart and put those away and put something completely different together. So my thing is like, I think it's just the way I like to record. You know, I'm using the pedals so intensively. I'm playing the pedals almost as much or more than the guitar half the time.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm twisting feedback knobs while I'm holding notes and doing all kinds of weird stuff. So yeah, I don't have an actual board setup ever, and I haven't for years. Right before lockdown, actually, I made a statement. I was like, I'm going to put together a board, you know, do it all nice, you know, zip tied, put it all together, and I'm not going to touch it for a year. And I was going to go up to some people and have them help me set it up. We were going to do a whole video on it. And then lockdown happened. And that just gave me an excuse to keep doing my weird ways. I was like, well, I guess we'll get to that one of these days, maybe. So I probably should revisit that project. It would be a fun video.
Bro, I've got like a huge board in the other room with a power supply set up that I've had for 4 years.
Yeah.
Not one pedal on it. I think I lost all the little like adapters, even that like you can plug into the power. What is it? Power block or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. But I do the same thing as you. Like I'll just grab a reverb pedal or a delay pedal for like what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
You know, and every once in a while I'll put them in a chain. I'll use more than one. And I have the epiphany too sometimes where I'm like, man, I wish I had a board. You know, like I wish I didn't have to put these together every time.
Yep.
But that's just the way you do it. And what's funny too is like you get guys like us that like have so much gear and we use it so differently than you'd think.
Right. Oh, totally. Yeah. I don't know what people would normally think that I would do, but it's not what I thought I would do if I ever had a lot of gear. I never thought ever in my wildest dreams that I'd be doing this for a living and have this space available to me. Like if you would have told me that when I was 20, I'd been like, you're on crack. There's no way that's ever going to happen. And so I'm like blown away that I get to do this all the time.
Dude, same. I never thought that I could just be a full-time amp builder.
It's wild.
You know, like especially like we live in Massachusetts. It's like cost of living is insane here, and it just made it work. You know.
Mm-hmm. It's shout out to everybody that's like listening to this right now. I'm sure you got customers of yours that are going to hear this. You know, all the listeners of this podcast. That's the only reason. If nobody was paying any attention to this, then I would have to go back to, crawling under trucks again. And I'm not above doing it. I'll do it if I have to, but I'm certainly thankful to not have to do that anymore.
Yeah, bro, I was selling cell phones. This is so much better.
It's so much. Yeah. So I feel like maybe some of our earlier statements might sound like we were like kind of maybe complaining a little bit. And neither of us were. It was just like, just more expressing like, this is something that I didn't see coming with this job, really.
Yeah. Well, I think you got to think about it. Like the journey is probably the most important part of the whole thing. But if you want to do something like this, like the journey is kind of hard.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time. But I wouldn't trade any of that experience for anything.
No, absolutely not.
And that's how you fail and you make the mistake. So when you get to the point where you can actually do this, you can actually do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing. I've said this on the podcast many, many times, but one of the things I heard, it was a newer pedal builder came up to Josh Scott from JHS Pedals at NAMM. I was standing there and I don't remember who it was. I wish I could remember who it was, but they just went up to him and said, "Hey, Josh, you've been doing this a long time. What's some advice you have for a smaller builder?" And he just said, "Stick around." He was like, just if you can just stick around and exist in this industry, you're going to be doing better than 99% of people who try to get into it. Just stick around.
Most people are going to quit.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. I've already seen some things that have happened in that time frame. I was like, wow, that's interesting advice. And then I wasn't even sure if I fully understood what he meant by that,
Yeah.
And now I've seen it. I've seen people come and go just in my time. And I'm like, wow, he's 100% right. Sticking around is the hardest part.
Yeah, I know. Especially, if you're going to try to go full time with it too.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easy to stick around when you have it as a side hustle.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah. Luckily for me, my wife has been very helpful too. Like she helped me grow the business and build the business, and it was cool. We wanted to take her full time and stuff. So like I couldn't have done it without her.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If my wife didn't support me in this, it would have never happened. Never, ever.
Yeah. And I think that crushes a lot of people's dreams too. Like, guys that do want to do something like this, that it's tough. They don't have a supportive spouse or someone that can do it with them. There's a million reasons to not go into business for yourself. And when you want to do something that's like in one of your passions, unfortunately, there's even more reasons why you shouldn't do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In your head, at least, like you make more excuses, and you just got to overcome that stuff,
Yeah. And this is a subject that gets brought up a lot on this show. And I try to talk about it as much as I can. And a lot of people have reached out after episodes like these where we've said these type of things. And I'm like, this is not if somebody doesn't want to have their own business, I totally understand that. I am less stressed having my own business. And that's weird. My dad was a ball of stress when he tried to have his own business. It was terrible for him. He just isn't wired that way. I think a lot of it comes down to just got to know yourself, and that's going to make you happier no matter what you're doing. Just recognize what makes you tick and what works for you, and you're going to be immensely happier regardless of your career path.
Yeah, totally. And the stress is just different too. Like you don't have someone that's breathing down your neck looking for results, but there's stress in creating those results for yourself.
Yes. Yep. It's not to say it's not stressful. It super is.
But I would take that second kind of stress any day.
Yes. I'm more comfortable with it being on me. It's totally. I've always been that way. That's why I didn't like team sports. Well, man, we are getting down to the last few minutes of this podcast, and I want to take a second and let you take the floor. If there's something you wanted to say to a few thousand people, shout out your grandma, talk about whatever you want to talk about. Now is your opportunity to do that.
Oh, thanks so much, man. Yeah. Well, again, Blake, thanks for having me on the show. I was really excited. I got to meet you. Been talking for a few months, and I'm just very grateful to be able to connect with guys like you and have an audience online that wants to see this. And I'm super grateful that I've been able to, cultivate this business and, meet so many great people within the industry and my customers and, really actually build something that is starting to really matter. I got a couple guys working here now, which has been tremendous for me, like teaching them about amps, how to work with amps, how to solder. And that's actually become a new passion of mine too. Cause like, obviously I love the amps, I love the music, I love the customers. And now I'm starting to love teaching these guys and developing them and kind of just like building the business and watching things grow, so it's been awesome. But yeah, man, I guess I don't really have anything specific, but I would like to say thank you for all the guys that have been there along the way and used Amplified Nation amps and our customers and our artists. And I hope that everyone's really enjoying our products.
Very cool, man. Thank you for that. That was great. All right. Final questions. These are the classic questions I wrap up every episode with. One of which you may have sort of answered already, but we'll find out. First one is, what is your favorite Boss pedal?
My Boss pedal, I like the DD5, as I mentioned. I also have a digital reverb that I use a lot.
It's like the RV2?
Dude, I don't know. My favorite it's probably the grunge pedal.
The grunge? That's not a Boss. That's not a Boss.
Oh, come on.
That's Digitech.
Digitech. It was so long ago. Yeah, so I'll go with the DD5 then.
All right, that works. But if Boss did make a grunge pedal, I have to talk to my.
I could have sworn that was a grunge. It was a Boss pedal.
It's very much still in the same like style of enclosure.
Yep.
Like Digitech just was like, hey, that looks like a good enclosure. We'll use that. So yeah, I can understand the confusion. Final question. And this is the one that gets a little dicey, a little controversial, especially with people over there on the East Coast. What is your favorite kind of pizza?
Oh, pizza, man. I would say the New York style pizza.
Mm-hmm.
We always get it when we're driving up from the city. I don't know if it's the same style in Connecticut, but Connecticut has like like that's like the best pizza in the whole world. It's so good. My wife went to Quinnipiac in Connecticut, so we're like always down there seeing friends and stuff. And Pepe's, I think it's Pepe's.
Yep.
Yeah, so good, man. That's the pizza.
I have a t-shirt from there. Shout out Eric. He sent me the t-shirt. I still have not been there yet, but I will get there. I will.
Yeah, that's the pizza though.
Oh man, we have a New Haven style pizzeria here from a guy that is from there. And it's like the best pizza in town. Shout out Demo's here in Portland. It's just, I'm hungry now. Great. That's just what I needed. Well, dude, Taylor, thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast. We're going to slide over to Patreon now and we'll get real weird with it.
All right. Sounds good, Blake. Thanks again.
Yeah, of course. For Taylor, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones.
Alrighty, folks. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. I am still here in the lobby of the Mark Queen Hotel in Seattle, Washington. I have to say, I'm at the tail end of my stay here. I really enjoyed it. It's a very cool old building, like a 1918 or something like that. I know, for the British listeners, they're like, my garden shed is that old. But for us in the States, that's an old building. It used to house, like, Henry Ford's engineering school, or no, I think the people who went to the engineering school stayed here, something like that. But apparently it's haunted. I know I said that in the intro, but as I'm recording this, I still haven't seen any ghosts yet, which is, slightly to my chagrin. Anyway, if you want more of this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/tonemob, and for $5 a month, you can hear what else Taylor and I talked about. Yeah, we talked about some other stuff. We did indeed. And I hope you go there. I hope you check it out. And I hope you enjoy it. We also have, as I said, an ad-free option of this podcast for $3 a month. You can go to patreon.com/tonemob and you can see that. And we also have some other tiers. I say we, I mean me, because there's no one else involved. It's just me. It's just me over here. Wait, was that a ghost? I don't know. Anyway, I'm over here just wondering if that's a ghost or not. Yeah, if I get abducted by ghosts, is that a thing? I don't think that's a thing. Anyway, if you want to get those ad-free episodes, you can go to patreon.com/tonemob and check all that stuff out. And as always, please please, please, please tell a friend about this show. It doesn't exist without you. I appreciate you so much. I'm going to be coming at you with some more internet content very, very soon. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I will talk to you later.
One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
Well, hey friends, my name is Zach Lupiton. You may know me from the band Dust Bowl Revival, but I also host a music discovery podcast called The Show on the Road. For the last 5 seasons, I've been able to dive deep and have intimate chats with folks like the Lumineers, Ani DeFranco, Wolfpack, Keb Mo, Lake Street Dive, Bela Fleck, and more. So guess what? After 150 conversations with some of my favorite songwriters from around the world, we are bringing brand new episodes to the Osiris Network. New interviews and intimate acoustic performances will be coming at you this summer. And which episodes are coming next, you ask?
I am Zach Goody, the lead singer for the band Smash Mouth.
Our band is called Milky Chance. We are based in Berlin.
My name is David Shaw. I sing and write songs with my band, The Revivalists.
Trust me, these conversations go some wild places. So subscribe to The Show on the Road on Osiris, and we'll see you soon.
Hey, this is Aaron from No Simple Road. I'm inviting you to come hang out with Apple, Mel, and I as we talk with the musicians, artists, chefs, authors, and beyond from the world that turns us on. We're reaching into the improvisational music scene, the psychedelic culture, the festival world, and getting to know what makes the people tick that create those scenes. Come join us on the long, strange trip over at No Simple Road.